Welcome to the Live Unrestricted podcast, a show where you'll learn how to heal your relationship with food and your body so that you can focus your time and energy on more important things like your personal growth. I'm your host, Sabrina Magna, food freedom coach, and my mission is to help make your life happier and healthier without stress, overwhelm, or guilt about food. If you love the show, please do go out and share it. And if you're looking for support with your relationship with food, details about my programs are in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's jump in. So before we get into today's episode, I just want to make a quick announcement and tell you about a very exciting collaboration that I've been working on for the past couple of weeks with the Undiet platform. So what is it exactly? Undiet Online is the largest non-diet space on the internet with over 250 experts teaching you everything you need to know about how to build a healthy relationship with food and your body, and a community of undieters who just get it. So some key points are that it's a safe, diet culture-free space to connect with other undieters while learning intuitive eating and repairing body image. The platform launched on February 1st, 2023, and I'm just so excited about this project because it's making these resources available and accessible for pretty much anyone. So if you're not sure if Undiet Online is a good fit for you, if you've been working on intuitive eating for a while or you're just getting started, the mindset work is always the fastest way to food and body freedom. So if you want to eat intuitively, move your body in ways that you enjoy, and stop obsessing about your body, then this web app is a great resource to add to your undieting toolbox. Focusing on the food and your body are key aspects of undieting, but changing the way that you think is always going to provide the biggest transformations. So on this platform, you're going to have access to a powerful lineup of experts who are going to talk about all kinds of different topics, from diabetes and health at every size, intuitive eating, fertility, pregnancy, body image, menopause, binge eating, raising intuitive eaters. There is everything for everyone and for whatever you're struggling with. And for only $19 a month, you get access to lessons, courses, 24/7 community support, meditations, non-diet movement classes from the best in their fields. So if you are getting serious about leaving dieting behind you and really healing your relationship with food in your body, then this is a no-brainer. If you want to learn more about the platform and see how you can join, I will leave the link in the show notes, and I hope to see you on the inside. All right, that's it for my rambling. Let's get into today's episode. When I was struggling with my eating disorder and my obsession with exercise, I always felt this anxiety, this guilt, this shame that I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't perfect enough. I wasn't eating perfectly enough. I wasn't trying hard enough with my diet and exercise. And that's because we live in a culture that is constantly striving for perfection and productivity. Even if it's not food related, then we're living in a hustle culture where there's no time for rest or just being with yourself and doing something for the pure enjoyment of it. We feel bad for enjoying a piece of cake or eating something just because we want to, and not necessarily because it's going to nourish our bodies. We feel bad for taking time off from exercise to give our bodies a break. And as a result, we live in constant anxiety, shame, and guilt, none of it which is productive to creating a better life. And so today, that's what we're talking about with our amazing guest that I'm so excited about, Joelle Rabow Maletis, to talk about how to reduce the negative and obsessive thoughts that disable you from living a peaceful and balanced life. Joelle is a world-renowned international speaker, psychotherapist, and researcher specializing in eating disorders, PTSD, and trauma. As an expert, retired professional athlete, and someone who has overcome her own eating disorders, she helps others discover their hopes, dreams, and abilities to strive through adversity, trauma, and mental challenges. She was featured on TED's Top 10 Mental Health Videos, hired as an executive coach for Apple, Google, Netflix, and Zoom, along with a long list of amazing achievements in the mental health field. In today's conversation, we talk about what moderation actually means and how to achieve it, why healing your relationship with food doesn't actually start with a focus on food, the biggest mistake that new intuitive eaters make when trying to resolve their food issues, what her outward in approach to healing is. We talk about the biggest reason that emotional eating is such a hard habit to break and the wrong way that people go about it. We talk about an important mindset shift to make to start enjoying and be consistent with exercise, the one thing that you can focus on for the next 7 days to start improving your life, and so much more. I could have talked to Joelle for hours on end, and I'm just so excited to bring this conversation to you. So without further ado, let's jump into our conversation with Joelle.
Thanks, Sabrina, for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Yeah. And so let's just get into it. I can see that you have a book on ballet in your background. So Can you tell me a little bit more about your story, your past, and how you started your own practice, why you started Joelle Rabow Maletis and Associates?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I always say it's not a super glamorous story. I got to do what I love. So I was a ballerina by training. I did that professionally for many years, and then shift over and moved into doing dance and film and commercials and being in front of the camera in that way. So I had a very long career, and then finally it ended with some injuries and just unexpected things in my life that I couldn't control. And so that's an important piece I'll come back to with my story, this feeling of being completely out of control, right? So I had a very long career as a dancer, and it was a struggle, and it was definitely a love-hate relationship. And very early on, being in the world of ballet, it's all about aesthetics, how much you weigh, what you look like. So hopefully this isn't too triggering for listeners, and just there's a trigger warning. But ballet was hard for me. So, it was one of those things where I loved doing and I hated doing. And very early on started with having all sorts of broad spectrum eating disorders, I guess would be the best. One thing or another, it was a lot of things. And so it was a lot of maladaptive behavior, which is a slippery slope. And that very quickly turned into, having issues with anorexia, bulimia, orthorexia. And then what that looked like to maintain those behaviors. And then I got to pass, because I was a professional ballerina, I got to use that as an excuse. And so family, friends, at the time I was dancing, it was encouraged behavior, which is even more scary, by coaches and the industry. And so, it was one of those things where I didn't know how to manage it, because on the one hand, I was being told this is what I need to be doing in order to keep my career. And on the other hand, I had my friends and family looking at me saying, it doesn't look like things are okay. And so I felt like I was on this, endless loop of crazy. It felt crazy. And, and so really the therapy piece comes in much later. I ended up getting a master's in fine arts dance, and taught at a university, ran dance department, and then started doing some trauma work. And so really, I didn't start getting a handle on all of this until I started to understand the level of trauma that I had experienced in a bunch of different areas, and including, my experience as a dancer. And so then just sort of fell into, all puns intended, right? Doing therapy, but it was not my training. It wasn't on the radar. It wasn't that I had ever set out to do this. And so going to grad school and having my clinical supervisor very early on say, there's no way you're going to be able to work with eating disorders. You'll be triggered all the time. It's just not, it's not for you. And I went, ha ha ha, I'll show you. And there was some truth to that. and yet it was one of those things that helped keep me in recovery, if that makes sense.
Yes, I can absolutely attest to that. As someone who, I mean, my story is very similar to yours, and ballet and synchronized swimming are two very similar sports in terms of the culture behind body image. And like you were saying before, almost encouraging these maladaptive eating behaviors, because it really is like shrink your body at all costs. It's about the way that you look. It's about how thin your legs can be and how tall you can be. And I definitely know that, I don't know if you can agree with this, but like the more I work towards teaching other women how to have a healthy relationship with food, it constantly reinforces that in my own brain and helps me always work to make myself better and to really be an example of what I want to teach other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's okay, right? Where being able to have that space and hold that for other people, and then also not be perfect, right? Or controlling, or because it's so much of eating disordered behaviors and eating disorder comes from that need to control what's happening, because we feel like we have no control over our bodies. Our bodies just do what they're going to do, right?
Yeah.
And so the only way to control it is, well, if I restrict what I put in my body, if I increase the amount of workouts, if I, you know what I mean, if I can control the way that I look or present myself, these are all ways to help alleviate some of the anxiety, the shame, the guilt, right? The embarrassment of not feeling whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So kind of approaching that with clients, and it's like, I'm not perfect. I still struggle with some of this stuff. The difference now is, instead of it going on for months and months and months, and then I curl up in a ball because I can't cope, right? Now I catch it and I'm like, oh, I'm doing that thing again. Why am I doing that thing again?
And it's so important to look at those behaviors from a lens of just curiosity and compassion, because a lot of the times, like you were saying before, we think that we need to be perfect. And I think there's this misconception, and I know that you also you teach intuitive eating, and I think there's this misconception online for anyone who's new to the concept, who's trying to go on their own intuitive eating journey, that it's like either you're on or you're off. Like either you're doing it and you are an intuitive eater, or you're not. And there's very little space for nuance, especially when I'm starting to work with my clients and they're starting to notice like a bunch of wins here and there. They're able to keep snacks in the house. They're able to only eat half of their sandwich and leave the rest for later. They have all of these wins, and then they'll have a day where they overeat or they emotionally eat. And we think that we go right back to square one, and that just means that I can never be an intuitive eater.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting how that's so, like when you talk about synchronized swimming or ballet, or right, like, or sports in general, how that's the mindset. Well, it's like, oh, well, you screwed up this one time, so you're never going to get it.
Yeah.
Like so much of that, or it's socialized with, with young children, where, it's like, you keep making this mistake, you're never going to get this thing. Like, we don't realize the messaging and how much that with, food equals love and food equals comfort, like all of this subconscious messaging. And so we're like, oh yeah, well, okay, well, I, fucked that up today. I guess I'm never going to get it. And I always call it the fuck it's, or the why bother, right? So it's like, well, I screwed that up, so forget it. I'm just not willing to go back to it. I'm not willing to try. And that finding that grace for ourselves it's such a simple concept, right? And if it were that easy, we wouldn't have any listeners and everybody would be doing it, right? It's simple to understand, but in no way is it easy, because there's so much guilt and shame wrapped up into, why can't I do this? Why can't I do this, air quotes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's important to really understand when it comes to especially intuitive eating is you can be an intuitive eater and still emotionally eat from time to time. You can be an intuitive eater and still have these restrictive thoughts that you used to have when you were dieting or when you had an eating disorder. Those might not, and they pop up from time to time for me as well. But when you learn to look at them, and I really like to do this exercise where I disconnect myself from those thoughts and I know that they can be there and I don't need to act upon them. There's nothing wrong with having those thoughts. And especially if you've been dieting your entire life, or if you live in a larger body where you are surrounded by everyone telling you that being in a larger body is unacceptable or is wrong.
Yeah.
Those thoughts, they might always be there, but to not always act upon them, that's what it's all about. It's not about being perfect and switching this light where, okay, everything is fixed and you will never have any of those thoughts again.
Right. This is this idea of, oh, you just recover from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's realistic at all. I agree with you. And what was really interesting when I was, doing some research on this, and when I talk to clients, somebody could be, 2 pounds or 2 million pounds and anywhere in between, right? And the thinking is similar, right? I hate, I hate how I feel in my body. I hate how I look in the mirror. I hate how my clothes fit. I hate, like, the thinking is similar, regardless of body size, shape, right? Age, body type. And I think that that's lost, right? In some of this diet culture, or, either it's the restrictive or, like you said, the emotional eating, is that we lose this sense of why we're in this place in the first, right? We're here in the first place is what I'm trying to say, right? And that there's this, heavy versus, skinny kind of mentality that is not helpful at all for women. Because the manifestation of the behaviors are similar, right? And we all have our own story and our own relationship with food, right? And what food means.
Well, I think that's really important, especially when it comes to that mentality of, I'm in a bigger body, therefore I don't have the typical eating disorder body. We think that an eating disorder or disordered eating has to have a look, or it has to follow a certain checklist. And so I think that this holds so many people back from seeking help, because I know for me, I wasn't stick thin, I wasn't the classic anorexia body, but I also wasn't overweight. I was just kind of in my body, but it's not about the way that you look. It's about internally, what is your relationship with food and with your body? How is this affecting you on a day-to-day life? And I can say without a shadow of a doubt that what was going on inside my head was not healthy, but I resisted seeking help because for me, it wasn't what the stereotypical eating disorder would look like.
Totally, right? We undervalue, or we dismiss. We're like, oh, well, I'm not, I haven't been hospitalized, so it doesn't count, right?
Yeah.
Or oh, well, I haven't been labeled as obese, so it doesn't count. Like yes, we absolutely do, because we're constantly comparing ourselves to whatever image is out there, or whatever somebody else's story is. Oh, well, that's way worse than me, so I guess I don't have I don't. And what that translates to me when I hear that is, I don't deserve to take care of myself, be taken care of, and get better, right?
Yeah.
That's how I hear that. I don't deserve that. And my question is always, why don't you deserve that?
Yeah, and I talk a lot about, the hitting rock bottom moment where it's almost impossible to keep functioning the way that we are. But so many people, they live in constant misery and unhappiness and shame and guilt, but because they're still able to basically get through the day, and they're not thriving, they're just kind of surviving. If they're able to survive, then that's okay, right? And I strongly believe that we have one life on this planet, and if there is a possibility of you making your life better, of you actually feeling more joy, feeling more ease, then you should do whatever you can. And you, like you said, you do deserve to have that.
Yeah. And again, so simple, right? Like, oh, let me take out my magic wand and fix this problem. It's simple concepts, right? But they're not easy because they're tied up in so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if people have trauma, if they have, whatever their backstory is,
Absolutely.
it's painful. Like, who wants to go relive? I don't want to go relive this. I mean, like I said, I do this for a living. I've been talking about this forever. And, I have my moments like we were starting to say, like, it's this all or nothing. We're either intuitive eaters or we're not. Well, I like this idea of moderation. And I had somebody ask me recently in an interview, and they're like, well, what does that actually mean? Because moderation isn't the same for everybody. And I'm like, exactly. Because what's moderation for me is not going to be moderation for you or one of our clients, or you know what I mean? And so moderation is all about, like, can you sit with the messages in your head? Can you sit with what the choices you want to make, right? And then sometimes struggle through that, because moderation may be this fuck it moment where you're like, I give up today. And my challenge for people is always, yeah, but tomorrow's another day. We get to try it again tomorrow. So it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to just, you know what, I totally give up today. And that mindset is really hard. It's a hard shift to make.
Yeah, that actually brings me to something I wanted to talk to you about, because I'm sure that you've seen this with your clients. I see it every single day. Is most people who have issues when it comes to food and body, they live their entire life. They make all of their decisions, all of their actions have guilt and shame associated with it. They live in constant self-loathing and shame about their behaviors, about their past. And we think that if we're hard enough on ourselves, if we hate ourselves enough, if we beat ourselves enough, then that's going to motivate us to make a change. And I know that you talk a lot about the importance of self-love and of self-kindness when it comes to healing, when it comes to making a change. So why do you think that self-love and self-kindness is actually the best thing that you can do when you're trying to heal your relationship with food?
Yeah, because, again, food is our emotional state, right? Our well-being, our sustenance, our ability to survive is all built around food. There's a reason why there's comfort food, right? And emotional eating, it makes us feel good. We get all of this emotional content from the biochemistry that happens, right? And so how do you separate out, I eat something, it makes me feel happy, and then I feel guilty because I, quote, shouldn't eat that thing, fill in the blank, whatever thing it is, right? Whatever forbidden food that somebody has in their mind. And so now I feel guilty because, I know that that's not good for me, or I have all this negative messaging around that particular food, and now I've consumed it, right? Like it's this twisty, turny, interwoven, deeply subconscious piece, right? And so part of it is, where the heck do you start? Where do you start with fixing some of this? And so we know diets don't work, right? We know there's a lot of things that don't work. I'm not a scale person. I don't have clients work with scales. In fact, I do a lot of work to get away from that and measuring whether, right? So there's a lot of things that I as a clinician think don't work. So where do we actually start? So sometimes it's, can we give ourselves permission to make mistakes with our food choices? Right? Can we just start there? Can we start with, I'm going to use a gratitude practice that has nothing to do with food, right? And work on my mindset, because if I feel more positive that day, chances are I'm going to be more tolerant of my ability to make different choices. And if I could be a little bit more tolerant, right, I can give myself a little bit more permission or allow myself to make more mistakes. See, so we start to change that negative neural net, that way that we do things in this negative feedback loop into a positive one. And then we can start really working with food. So for me, I try and hold this space of let's go outward in. Let's work with some of the way that we think about ourselves, the way that we think about things. Can we hold different space for ourselves? Because going after food right away is really hard. Right.
Yes.
It's like, let me just kind of like stick this knife in, twist it and pull it out. And then we're like, okay, cool. You feel better.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always work well. So I try and go with, can we think about ourselves in a different way and give ourselves permission to try new things? And when we can do that, dealing with food doesn't seem as scary. Doesn't mean that it goes away, right?
Yeah, well, I think that's so important because this wraps into emotional eating. And this is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I think a big reason why people want to heal their relationship with food, but they're also afraid of getting that source of joy taken away. Because what I see is that people live really unbalanced lives. And so joy is often only consumed or gotten through food. And when you're not getting that through day-to-day activities, when you don't feel any kind of self-love, any kind of positive reinforcement throughout the day, then the thought of no longer turning to food to get that dopamine boost, it can be really scary, because then where else are you going to get that joy? And I think that's exactly what you're saying, is if you tackle the food right away, then people are not going to be able to make that detachment, because there's nothing else that they're going to get. We cannot go through the day without any kind of positive feelings.
Right. Absolutely. And I wouldn't, like, I'm just thinking about me when I was at the worst parts of my eating disorders and then starting therapy. Like if I had to start with trying to manage my disordered behaviors around food, I wouldn't have stayed with it. Right. Mm-hmm. I would have went, it's too hard. I can't do it. I'm never going to get it right. I'm going to fail at this. It's the only thing that I, have control over. Like, I would have come up with every excuse in the world to say, I'm not going to do the work. Right. Instead of like, what are some, like you said, what are some areas that make me happy? What can I do for myself where I can learn to self-soothe? Because a lot of it too is people with, especially emotional eating, right? We don't know how to self-soothe.
Yeah.
So the only way that we feel soothed, right, emotionally, is by the comfort we get from food. And there's a biochemistry reaction that happens, and there's an explanation in why that works with, things like dairy and casein and sugar and how that affects our neurotransmitters. And so there's science behind why food is comforting and makes us mm-hmm. happy, right? And so without having anything to replace that with, like you said, there's no way that me, right, would have been able to do that.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have had anything, right?
Yeah. And I think it's all of the reactions that do happen in our brain in response to, like you were saying, sugar and dairy. I'm sure that you see all the fear mongering about food addiction and sugar addiction, but the soothing that we get from food, it's the behavior, it's ways that we get that comfort that are actually available through other things as well, through going for a walk or taking a warm bath or listening to music or doing yoga or doing meditation. All of those ways of self-soothing, we would never look at those things as being addictive, even though they do provide us with the same kind of emotional comfort. But we demonize food, and when I work with my clients, I help them see that emotional eating should not be should not be this scary, demonized thing, but one of the coping mechanisms that are available. But as you were saying, the problem is people don't know other self-soothing methods. And so that does become a loop because it's the only thing that brings them joy. And so it's very difficult to move away from that.
Yeah. And it's hard when nutrition science, there's a lot of controversy around it, right? And it's hard for people to understand that a calorie is a calorie is a calorie, a calorie is a calorie is a calorie is a calorie. It doesn't matter if that calorie comes from, your green juice, which I have on my desk, or a energy bar, or a piece of fruit, or an ice cream. Like a calorie is a calorie is a calorie.
Mm-hmm.
So some of it is really looking at, why can't we use food in moderation to self-soothe if we have other soothing, like other coping mechanisms? So when we talk about this idea of perfectionism, some of the cycle that we have to break in order for intuitive eating to work is this all or nothing perfectionism, which is, you know what, if you're out with your friends and you decide that you want to have ice cream, have ice cream. And
even if you're not hungry, enjoy every single bite.
Right. Because is it emotional eating? Absolutely. Are you engaged and connected with your friends and doing something social? Absolutely. Are you not depressed, alone, and overeating ice cream? Absolutely. Right. Like that's the piece that gets lost, right? It's not the ice cream. It's the thought process and the behavior that we put into ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I love how you say demonizing, because that's exactly it. And that's terrifying when somebody's like, I've never had ice cream. I haven't had ice cream in 20 years. Ice cream's going to make me whatever. Or somebody who's like, that's all I eat and I can't control myself. Again, both ends of the spectrum. It's terrifying to get to that place, right?
Yeah.
So that's where that self-love component starts to help, which is, when you love yourself, you give yourself permission to do things like enjoy life. And sometimes that means enjoying ice cream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for someone who is stuck in that loop where food is their primary self-soothing mechanism and it's their primary source of joy, and they have that fear of, what if I heal my relationship with food and that gets taken away, and someone who is not getting any kind of joy from other areas of their life or don't know how to self-soothe, where do you start?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I typically don't start with trying to change eating behavior or food behaviors first. Because it's, like you said, it's scary, and that brings up a whole bunch of resistance. And so for me, I start with, checking in with your mind and checking in with your body. When I eat this thing, because I really dislike good food and bad food. That's just me. I don't like the paradigm. A calorie is a calorie is a calorie, right? I have all sorts of, I have celiac, I have all sorts of issues, where like certain foods make my body sick. I actually love those foods. And so it is a choice, because there are times where I'm like, I'm eating it anyway. I know it's not going to make me feel good.
Yes.
I am making that conscious choice because I want to be engaged at the dinner party.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh my God. I say that about fried food for me all the time too.
Yeah. So I start there with, when you're eating, like, I don't want you to change your eating patterns yet, right? I don't want you to do anything different with the food choices yet. All I want you to do is think about, when I eat this thing, how do I feel in my body right now? Does my body feel happy or sad? Does my body feel heavy or light? And that's not about weight, that's about energy, right? Mm-hmm. Does my body feel tense or relaxed? That's it. I just want you to notice what's going on with your body, right? And then when you catch yourself, if you feel like you're overeating, or if you notice that your body's not responding positively to what you're eating, that could be celery, right?
Yeah.
If you notice that your body is not responding positively, then what's the next thing to do? Do you feel like you can say, I would like to put this down and make a different choice right now, right? Food wise. Or do you say, I'm going to keep eating it because I want to, but I just want you to pay attention. That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. No judgment. Just pay attention. Because then what we're going to learn is how we feel about different foods. And that's not about weighing, journaling, amount, right? It's just, what is our body doing? And what is our experience with this? So can we start there? And that for again, simple concept, not easy to do. For people, that's a much easier approach because I'm not asking them to judge. I'm just asking them to notice.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that going back to this all or nothing perfectionism is to also understand that your body might respond differently to the exact same food on different days. And it's okay to one day choose to have that piece of cake because it feels really good and your body is responding great to it. And then on a different day to start eating it and realizing, oh, you know what? My body's not responding super great to this. And tonight I'm going to decide to make a different choice if I choose to. Allowing yourself to live in that gray zone and stop categorizing foods. And as you're working through this, what you also notice is that you get to choose. You get to make the rules. You get to decide what feels good and what doesn't for you.
Absolutely. And, and I have some and rules. I love how you say, you get to make the rules because we get so hung up with eating disordered behaviors on what the rules are. We have to have the rules. We have to follow the rules. The rules say X number of calories, then that's what right? We're so hyper focused on the rules. And I laugh because I find that that's the behavior that I still go to. Okay, what's the rule? And I really have to catch myself. So the difference between and I really work on progress, right? Not ending. We're not, right? So healing is about progress and healing is about catching. So now when I find myself in that, okay, I'm making all of these rules, that's always about anxiety, always. It's always about anxiety. It's about control. It's about something happened at work or with my family or whatever. There's some external drive that's causing this internal reaction, right? And so some of it for me is humor and I laugh and I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to do this today. And so sometimes when I overinflate it and exaggerate and give myself permission, you're like, all right, do the thing you just made a rule on. It's to me, it starts to sound ridiculous. And it's a way for me to step back, take a breath and go, okay, really, what's the decision point? Do I want to do this or do I want to do that? And most of the time I can recognize that, oh, I'm in that. And it's really not about the food. It's about whatever's going on. And it's easier for me to shift focus. There are other times where I'm like, don't care, fuck it, I'm eating it. And tomorrow is a new day. And you know what? I know my tummy's going to hurt. I know I'm going to have a headache. I know I'm going to feel like crap. I know I'm going to be ashamed and I'm going to feel guilty. And I guess tomorrow I call my therapist because if that's where I'm going to wake up, then that's the road we're going to go. Right. Like, so some of it is just leaning into it and saying, you know what? I don't care. And that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You said something about control, which I think is so true. I was talking to one of my clients this week, and she was saying how she's been feeling all of this stress for the past couple of weeks, and it's been affecting her digestion and bloating and the way that she handles food. And after, diving into it, we realized that all of this stress was self-induced, and she was feeling the pressure of all of the shoulds of what she should or shouldn't be doing, all of the things on her to-do list. And we are constantly looking for external things, other people, to tell us how we should or shouldn't live our lives, thinking that it's going to make us feel better. If we follow the rules, then we'll feel better. And what we end up doing is feeling like crap and feeling even worse about ourselves because we're not able to follow other people's rules to a T. And people have become so disconnected to their intuition of what is the goal here? The goal really is to just feel good. The goal is to feel good. The goal is to be aligned with what feels good to us. And when we're constantly looking to external things to tell us how we should live our lives or how we should be eating, we end up constantly feeling that pressure that we're not doing enough, that we're not being good enough.
Yeah, we fail, right? Every single time. We're constantly, so now I'm a failure. So then I get to add that to the list of negative things I tell myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
That shoulda, woulda, coulda is toxic. So I work with that too before addressing food sometimes. And it's like, whose voice is that? Is that your coach? Is that your 16-year-old self? Is that your parent? Like, is that you in the present moment? Like, that shoulda, would, like, who is talking in your ear? And let's just identify that. And then my other piece with clients, we work on that skill is according to whom? Like, you should, what, like, who said so? Well, I read
Who
this.
said so?
Yeah, I read this thing and I'm like, cool. I read a lot. Like, that doesn't help.
Yeah, I one of my clients, that specific client, we finally realized that she wasn't making any time for things that she legitimately wanted to do just for fun. Like things that just brought her joy, not for the goal of being productive, not for the goal of doing something, but just of being. And so I asked her, what is one thing this week that you could do just for you? Just me time, just to enjoy your own presence. And I had shared this meditation app with my group. And so she said, well, I could do what everyone else is doing and I could download that meditation app and give myself that 10 minutes of meditation. And I asked her, would you be doing that out of pure desire, or are you doing it out of obligation because you feel like you should? And she said, obligation. I said, then that's not what you want to do. You want to do something because you are excited about it and you don't feel like it's another task on your to-do list, but simply because you want to. I think a lot of people feel like we live in this constantly productive culture where you should always be doing something that's going to move you forward. And we neglect that time to just be and to just enjoy yourself because you just want to.
Yeah, the hustle culture is, it is that is also toxic, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm definitely guilty of that. So it's almost been a year, and that's an important distinction of time. So last March, I broke my ankle and my foot in 4 places. And it, so I was in a boot and then I had physical therapy. I'm still in physical therapy. And it was devastating, feels like just hyperbolic or dramatic. It took me some time to realize how much that impacted my mental health, my stress management, my mood, my eating. And it wasn't the addiction to working out anymore. It was the ability to not be able to move. And I didn't realize just getting out and moving, and that didn't have to be like, going for a 5-mile run and doing a HIIT workout or, it was just being able to move up, go up and down the stairs with ease, right? Take a walk, like just the little things. And again, I teach this stuff for a living, right? And so one would think that I would be faster with catching on to, but it really felt like my body betrayed me and that I couldn't be part of the hustle culture because I wasn't hustling. I was moving really slowly, and learning how to take time to heal was fundamentally painful. And and so that ties into food too, where we don't give ourselves permission to take care of our bodies the way our bodies need to be taken care of. Mine was like, how fast can I get back in the gym?
Yeah.
And my doc is like, Joe, you need to slow the hell down. Like, you are going to hurt yourself even more. The recovery is going to take even longer. Like it's going to take how long it's going to take. And I'm, going, well, I'm a retired athlete and I take care of myself and I did, and I'm going through the laundry list of all the things I think I do great, and realizing that like I'm failing here at every level.
Yeah.
Right. And so part of that is the vulnerability it takes to look at yourself and be willing to say, I'm doing this again, right? Or I'm struggling and I don't have all the answers and I do need help and I need to figure it out. And I don't have enough joy. I'm an empty nester. That was a huge shift. So all of this stuff is happening at the same time. And I felt like my whole world was falling apart. And all the stuff that started to come back was the eating, the control, the athletics, right? Like all of this stuff that I felt like I had dealt with. And so, it was a really good lesson for me on paying attention to the external stressors and not having enough joy. I was so fixated on how awful it was that I forgot that there are things I do every day that bring me joy.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because it's true. I think people see professionals, they see therapists, they see coaches and people who have overcome their eating and food issues and think, well, you just get it you just stop working on it. And that's simply not the case. It's the same way that you work a muscle in a gym. If you stop going to the gym, you're going to get weak again. And when you go back to the gym, you're going to have to work your way up. And so your brain is the same way. It's a constant reaffirmation of what you believe in and what your vision is for how you want to live your life. And I'm definitely the same way. If I take a break from exercise, I do exercise because it does bring me joy. If there's one day where my body is talking to me and saying, okay, you need a break today, and then the next day I wake up and I still don't feel well enough to work out, there is that guilt, but I already gave myself a break yesterday. Why can't I get back into it? And just acknowledging that that's what my body needs. It's what my body needs. It's what it's communicating with me. There's no guilt in there. And if anything, you're doing the best thing that you can for it right now, which is taking a break. And if it's 2 days, if it's a week, it doesn't matter. If that's what feels good for you and that's what you need, get rid of that guilt and shame of what you should be doing and just pay attention to what feels good right now.
Yeah. And it's, and like we said, it's so hard to do that. And I think, for me, I'll just speak about me personally. The body dysmorphic component to it, right? The body image struggles of, well, if I don't work out, then I'm going to look fill in the blank, right? Whatever that is, or such and such isn't going to, whatever, like I said, I feel crazy when I'm in that space. So I'm just talking about me, right? Like whatever those crazy type thinking, thoughts that I'm spinning on, it's really hard to say, well, my body needs a break and it's going to be okay. Like we get so hung up in this doom and gloom, and that the sky is going to fall if we don't get the workout in, or if we don't stick to our meal plan, or if we don't, we're so conditioned to the sky is going to fall. And so for me, that thought stopping process of like, really, Joe, really, is the sky going to fall? Because if the sky's going to fall, you need to be doing something like not worrying about what you're going to exercise or eat or think, or like, is falling, you probably need to, and it sounds ridiculous, but it's one way for me to kind of snap myself back into logical thinking of like, all right, come on, you don't feel good, it's okay for you to take your, or what I've been trying to do now for me also, and with my clients, is check in with your body. And if you're like, I don't feel like exercising today. Okay, cool. Ask yourself what you do feel like doing, right? Instead of saying, well, that's fine, I'm just not going to go to the gym. There's the guilt and shame. But it's like, no, I don't feel like going to the gym, but I do feel like getting a little movement. So maybe I'm just going to take 10 minutes at the end of the day and just stretch while I'm watching TV. I'm going to lie on the floor and stretch my body, and that feels good. Or I don't feel like doing my HIIT workout, but I would like to just walk around the block, or I'm going to take my meeting at standing up, right? And maybe I'll walk up and down the stairs a few times while I'm on my call, instead of like, it isn't this all or nothing. So sometimes it's, I don't feel like doing that. So what do you feel like doing? Because like you, movement and exercise gives me joy. And so when I don't have that, I feel like my world is crumbling. So now it's like, well, what would give me joy? If I can't do that, or I'm not up to that, or I don't, especially with the injury, I couldn't do that. What were some of the things that I could do? Maybe it was taking a bath or doing something kinesthetic where, maybe doing a puzzle or coloring or just getting something that had some movement to it that felt good to me, and so it's changing the mindset, right?
Yeah, for sure. And as someone, I have scoliosis, so I live in chronic back pain, and there are days where I can't do the HIIT workout. I can't do the weights. And, that took me a really long time to come to terms with that. I can't do the same kind of exercise that I used to do when I was young. And a lot of the days it does mean just going for a walk or taking a bath or doing some light stretching. But like you said, getting rid of that all or nothing mentality around what it means to move your body and doing something that feels good on that day. And you might go in periods where you're running for a couple of weeks, couple of months, and then you get over it and you feel like doing yoga instead. And then you go into biking, always tuning in to, okay, am I doing this out of obligation again, or because that's what I used to do in the past and I used to enjoy it? But right now, if you're not enjoying it and you feel like it's a chore, change things up. Do something that brings you joy. The best kind of exercise is the one that you want to do.
That, and I absolutely, like, hands down, agree with you wholeheartedly. And I also work with people on, what does exercise actually mean? Because there's so many of my clients, especially women who have young children, right? And they're like, well, I'm not getting any exercise. How many times did you lift your baby today? Did you vacuum? Did you push the stroller? Did you put a child in and out of the bath? Like, that all counts as exercise. Like, we count that. And men too, where they're like, well, I didn't go and I didn't lift. And it's like, but what did you do? Like, what physical things did you do in your day to day? Right? Because that counts as exercise.
It does. So, it does. Absolutely. And so, as we wrap things up, is there any last words, so I'm trying to think of someone who's listening to this right now, and they're starting at the beginning, right? And so they're hearing all of this conversation around emotional eating and around that all or nothing mentality when it comes to food and exercise. So to that person who's like, okay, this all makes so much sense to me. What is something that I can focus on this week, for example? I know that you focus on the external and you don't focus on the food right away. So someone who is like, okay, what does that even mean for me? What's an actionable thing that they can do this week?
Yeah, so it's all skills based to start with. And so there are amazing podcasts. There's a ton of workbooks. There's intuitive eating, emotional eating. There's so much stuff. So I think some of it is what sounds good. Like, there's not a right place to start. There's just a place to start. So what sounds like that's reasonable. Maybe it's starting a gratitude journal and just working on finding joy. Maybe it's really picking one activity every day that's going to bring you joy. And you're like, I'm just going to try that for 7 days. I say, try it for 7 days. If it works, cool. If it doesn't work, don't do it.
Yeah.
There's other things, right? So what am I willing to try, right? And pick a skill. Is it journaling? Is it making a commitment to listen to a podcast? Is it making a commitment to ask yourself, does this food make my body feel good or bad? That's it. Does this food make my body feel good or bad? That's all. If it makes it feel bad, okay. Not, and so what? Who cares? That's not, but okay. And so what? So what do you want to do about it? Do you want to finish it? Do you want to pick something different? Because whatever the answer is, it's perfectly okay. The answer is okay. So it really is. Just pick something little to start. And if it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, pick something else, right?
I love that. I know that you put something on your Instagram, which I was like, yes. And it was something about everyone has different needs. And the same way that you wouldn't put on someone else's shirt and expect it to fit perfectly on you, try on different shirts until you find one that feels good. If gratitude or a gratitude journal doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel good, maybe in a couple of months, once your mindset has changed, it will be the next thing for you. But start with something that feels right and feels doable for you right now. If that means starting a meditation practice, stretching every night, doing something that feels right for you instead of, again, that conversation about what you should be doing because that's what someone else is doing. Try something for 7 days and see if it's making your life even a little bit better.
Yeah. And I'm a big reward person, right? Like, I don't know if you when you were a kid, if you had a sticker reward chart, right? But I always joke with my clients and I'm like, you get 10 gold stars, right? And they're like, yeah, but I failed this week. And I'm like, according to whom? You showed up. You showed up. You showed up for yourself. You showed up in your session. You showed up. You told me the truth. That's a win, right? So sometimes it's like, you know what? Buy some stickers. Put a gold sticker on a, the calendar. And you're like, you know what? I had good, positive thinking today. Sweet. Tomorrow it might be, I wrote down something I was grateful for. The next day it might be, I really felt good about my food choices. The next day it might be, I did that meditation app that I put on my phone 8 months ago and I keep staring at. Like it doesn't have to fall there. There doesn't have to be a rhyme or reason. Stay off of toxic websites, articles, podcasts. Anything that doesn't feel good to you and it doesn't resonate is not going to help you.
Yes, 100%. Anything that triggers you to feel guilt or like you're not doing enough, you're not doing the right thing, because again, it disconnects you from what actually does feel good for you. What do you want to be doing? And I start all of my group coaching calls by asking every single one of my clients to tell me a win for the week. And I tell them there's no such thing as a small win. There's no such thing as something that is insignificant. And the more you learn to look for those wins in your life, the less you learn to look for the failures. And the more you feel like a winner, the more your actions are going to follow that.
Absolutely. And really reframing what a win is, because for me, a win was, you know what? I actually don't have to do my hair and makeup for every single phone call I take on Zoom and every single meet. I don't have to do, and that would have been unheard of a few years ago.
Yeah.
So when I'm in that mindset, I'm like, you know what? And then not apologizing for it, because we as women say, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not put together. Oh, I'm sorry. Stop saying I'm sorry. Even if that's all you do, try it for 7 days. Just say, you know what? Thank you so much for understanding that I just feel like being myself today. Thank you for being tolerant of me being a little bit late today. Thanks for understanding that, I'm not in the best mood. Whatever it is, stop apologizing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I could talk to you for hours. But anyone who is who loves you, who wants to follow you, who
Thanks.
wants to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I know you'll drop in the show notes how to spell my ridiculously long name, but
Yeah.
but yeah, you can find me on all the socials. It's a official Joelle Trauma Therapy. But I know you'll put everything. We respond to emails, DMs, TikTok, whatever it is. So feel free to reach out to us. We always have a giveaway for listeners. So if you're like, hey, I was listening to you and Sabrina have a conversation, we'll send you a free downloadable journal. It's a 10-day journal, super user-friendly, about creating happier mood. And we've got some self-love products that are out and some new things that are coming out. So yeah, thanks
Yeah,
for
I saw that
asking.
you have, I saw that you have that all in your bio on Instagram. So I encourage anyone to go, and especially if you're someone who struggles with self-care and self-love and all of that self-soothing that we talked about, your Instagram has so many great resources there. So I will definitely drop that all in the bio, in the link. Thank you so much for being here today, Joelle. I really appreciate you. And thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you on next week's episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.